Hello everyone to this lab video where we're looking at the whole body summary of the various organs, their various organ systems that we had learned about, just a way of sort of summarizing what we looked at throughout the course. So you can see the smiley face of this individual model here. We're going to look at it from the different portions and cover through some of the major structures we had learned about. So this won't go through the detailed aspects. That's what the other lab videos are about. This is going to be a very general overview. So first and foremost, we are looking at the head here. This is the most superior portion of the body where what's highlighted here is the skin has been removed, and you can see the skull structure here, where on the top we of course have the cranial bones, the facial bones, we have the eyes themselves. Looking to the lateral side, this is also where you'll find the outer ear with the pinna structure. Moving to the front here, if we look on the inside, so let's get this guy open, we can then look into the cranial cavity as well as some of the other structures as part of the respiratory system, the digestive system, so on. So let's go through each structure that we can see here and highlight them. Hopefully they will ring a bell from what we learned so far. So starting from the top, we of course have our skull structure. This is in this case in the front, the frontal bone, the parietal bone, and then in the back we have the occipital bone. This is where you'll find the foramen magnum, where our CNS continues on into the spinal cord. Speaking about the CNS, let's talk about the brain here. We of course have the cerebrum, the major portion of the brain. We then have the midbrain, and then we have the brain stem. Going through the individual structures, we have the various lobes as part of the cerebrum here. So we'll have the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and the temporal lobes on the side. This wonderful structure that you see here, made up of primarily white matter, is what we call the corpus callosum, that connects the two halves of the brain, or the two hemispheres. Right underneath is where you'll find the ventricles, the thalamus, the pituitary gland right there, the hypothalamus, so on and so forth. The ventricles themselves connect to the third ventricle, the fourth ventricle, through the various duct systems. This is where we have the CSF that's going to surround the central nervous system for buoyancy and protection purposes. Then we get to the midbrain right here, the deeper structures, where you'll have, in this case, this structure that really kind of stands out, called the pons. It has the sort of bulbous structure right here. On top of that is the midbrain. Below that is going to be the medulla oblongata. Going to the posterior portion here, where we have a gap here called the fourth ventricle. This is where you have the cerebellum. This is the little brain, very, very much packed in neurons. This is primarily where we store that motor memory associated primarily with muscle movements, things like that. Has a very long-lasting memory. Working our way down, this is where you'll have the continuation of the CNS going into the spinal cord, where right down the center we have the central canal. This is where the continuation of that CSF flow happens. Of course, surrounding the spinal cord, we have our vertebral column protecting the structures within the spinal cord itself. This is, of course, the cervical portion of the vertebral column. Moving to the anterior portion of our model here, this is where we have the nasal cavity highlighted here with the label N. Right alongside it, you can see one of the sinuses, another sinus right here, as well as the adenoid tonsil all the way in the back here, sampling the air that is being breathed in and out, making sure there's nothing nefarious getting in there. Working our way down, we then have the pharynx. The pharynx is the common pathway that not only connects our nasal cavity carrying air through it, but it also connects with the oral cavity part of the digestive system. This is, of course, the mouth, where you have physical digestion taking place of food that is going to be chewed, or what we call masticated, as well as going to be mixed with saliva, which has various enzymes primarily in the digestion of carbohydrates along with fats as well. A few other structures to highlight here. On the top, we have the palatine bones. This makes up part of your upper palate. And going to the back, we have the soft palate here, working our way to the teardrop-like structure, called the uvula. We then have the tongue labeled here in 10. This is where you'll have the various salivary glands, making sure it mixes with the food as we're going through that mastication process. Working our way down, again, going back into the pharynx. So we're now right here in the laryngopharynx area. You can see that this is where we get into the larynx itself. That little flap that you see there hopefully reminds you of the epiglottis. This is part of the swallowing reflex that would cover this particular structure here, so that when we swallow anything, it doesn't enter into the respiratory system. It gets shunted into the esophagus, which is posterior to the larynx itself, going down to the digestive system. Otherwise, the epiglottis is usually in the upper position here, so that air can enter into the respiratory system for breathing purposes. So that talks about the structures that are found within the head itself. We're just going to take a very quick brief pause here, and then please continue on watching video to the next section.